Paul Chan delivers the government budget for the next financial year with a deficit of $48.1 billion. All property cooling measures cancelled with immediate effect. And a two-tier standard tax rate system for salaries tax and tax under personal assessment. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Financial Secretary Paul Chan delivered the budget for financial year 2024-25 at the Legislative Council today. The second budget address of the current administration comes with a theme: advance with confidence, seize opportunities, strive for high-quality development. The peach-colored cover of the budget symbolizes the first glimmer of dawn, which inspires hope and longing for greater unity. This amid a fiscal deficit that has surged past $100 billion in the current fiscal year, with the fiscal reserves having fallen to $733 billion. Tightening expenditure, there will be no cash handouts or consumption vouchers, and no rent waivers for public housing. Rates and tax concessions will be scaled back. To boost government revenue, high-income earners and buyers of luxury homes will pay more taxes, and hotel accommodation taxes will be reintroduced. A second consecutive year of hikes for tobacco duty. And to buoy the housing markets, starting today, all property cooling measures have been removed and mortgage ratios relaxed. We begin our coverage with a breakdown of the budget's property-related proposals. The drop for 9 consecutive months in private residential prices has not only dented government income from both land sales and stamp duties, it has also led to calls from different sectors, urging the government to relax or drop the property cooling measures. With that, Financial Secretary Paul Chan announced in his budget address today that all such measures were scrapped with immediate effect.
This is turning the market back to the normal situation. How the market will react, of course, remains to be seen. But I think from the government's standpoint, it is important for us to grasp the right opportunity to remove the frictions in the market.
That means there are no more special stamp duty, buyer stamp duty, and new residential stamp duty for any residential property transactions. These so-called spicy measures were introduced between 2010 and 2016 to combat property speculation. The first sign of relaxation was seen in last year's budget when the 15% new residential stamp duty was halved to 7.5%.
I think it's good to help people to buy houses, especially good for the economy too.
Housing is always helpful to the extent that you can get more people in houses. They're buying furnishings, and it fuels the whole economy. So you'd think it would be a good answer, but would it tend to help those in need, or is it going to help the wealthy?
In lockstep, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority announced a relaxation of various property-related banking requirements. The maximum loan-to-value ratios in mortgages for properties valued at $30 million or below will be raised to 70%, or 60% for properties valued $35 million or above, and for non-self-use residential properties. The interest rate stress testing requirement for mortgage lending will be suspended as well because the U.S. rate hike cycle may be approaching an end. As to whether that will lead to more negative equity cases, the Monetary Authority said the latest loan delinquency or default ratios are still lower than pre-pandemic figures.
Even with these adjustments announced today, the Hong Kong banking sector has ample buffers to cope with any challenges from a sharp correction in property prices.
The Monetary Authority also relaxed the financing caps for property development projects back to the pre-2017 levels, including the financing caps in proportion to the expected values of the completed property, the property site, and construction costs. The HKMA also added there could be more measures introduced according to the evolving conditions of the property market. The budget review, the government has made some progress in finding more land to build flats, but it's understood the reclamation plan at Kao Yi Chau will not start as earlier scheduled. The 2024-25 land sale program will include 8 residential sites in addition to MTR projects, private developers projects, and redevelopment sites. Together, the potential land supply for the whole year could provide 15,000 units, 14% more than the annual demand figure projected in the long-term housing strategy. The government will make available land for the production of 80,000 private housing units in the coming 5 years. As for public housing, the government has identified sufficient land for building 308,000 units over the next 10 years. Financial Secretary Paul Chan has introduced a 2-tiered standard rates regime for salaries tax and tax under personal assessment. Very high income earners must pay slightly more tax. Mimo Sangai reports.
In a change from Hong Kong's low and simple tax structure, Financial Secretary Paul Chan announced in the budget that individuals who earn more need to pay more. People who are single and earn about $2.02 million annually are currently subject to the standard rate of 15%. Starting from the next financial year, a 2-tiered regime for salaries tax and tax under personal assessment will take effect. Individuals with a net income of $5 million or below will be subject to the same standard rate, 15%. However, the tax rate for those who earn more than $5 million rises to 16%. While around 12,000 people will be affected by the new measure, it will boost the government's revenue by $910 million. Financial Secretary Paul Chan said the amended standard rates are much lower than many developed economies. Sources say the adjusted taxes will not affect the lure for foreign investors to invest or live in Hong Kong. In Singapore, the salaries tax for high-income earners is 24%. In US and UK, the salaries tax for the high-earning group is 45%. This resident in Hong Kong shared the same view.
I am French originally. The numbers in French are much more higher, much more higher for people earning a lot of money. The country takes about 70%. It's not my case, but still seems quite reasonable. I think when you reach a certain amount of salary, you don't need to keep it all.
A progressive tax rating system for domestic tenements was also announced. The system has 3 tiers. Domestic properties with a monthly rateable value of $46,000 or below will be subject to a 5% tax, the same as previously. The tax for properties with a monthly rateable value between $46,000 and $67,000 will be increased to 8%. Properties that exceed $67,000 will be subjected to 12% tax. Mims 9 TV News.
Facing billions of dollars in deficit, the government has reduced the number of one-off relief measures in the next financial year. Timothy Lee reports.
Many Hong Kong residents have long benefited from the government's one-off relief measures, which are colloquially referred to as sweeteners. But there will soon be a noticeable drop in such treats. Both salaries and profits tax reduction will remain at 100%, subject to a ceiling of $3,000. The measure is expected to benefit around 2 million taxpayers and 160,000 companies. This as rates concession for both domestic and non-domestic properties for the first quarter of 2024-25 will be subject to a ceiling of $1,000, involving some 3.5 million properties. But some one-off measures, such as consumption vouchers, will be absent this year. We asked residents what they thought.
Of course, everybody's happy with, consumption voucher and tax breaks and free money. But I think, we need to also look at the government's budget, whether or not they are spending in a targeted way. Obviously, a lot of people are probably a bit well off. They might not benefit so much from these consumption vouchers. So if you give them more free money, it might not actually boost the economy that much.
Financial Secretary Paul Chan stressed the decision was made after considering the deficit situation in the city and hopes the community will be more understanding. He added the focus should be on improving the economy as a means to increase the income of residents. Meanwhile, the government will review 2 transport subsidy schemes, the $2 transport fare concession scheme for the elderly and eligible persons with disabilities, as well as the public transport fare subsidy scheme. While the government will continue to roll out several one-time relief measures, it noted there will be a reduction in the so-called sweeteners. The government decided not to distribute cash or consumption vouchers this year, and many members of the grassroots stress authorities should better utilize their reserves to alleviate the financial burdens of residents. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The government expects a consolidated deficit of $101 billion for the current fiscal year. That's some $51 billion more than earlier estimates. For the next financial year, Paul Chan expects a budget deficit too. Total government revenue for 2024 to 25 is estimated to be $633 billion, with profits tax making up the largest portion. Total government expenditure will increase to $776.9 billion, with substantial resources to be allocated to livelihood-related policy areas, such as health, social welfare, and education. Meanwhile, the government will issue bonds worth $120 billion next year. That will include $50 billion worth of silver bonds for senior citizens and $20 billion worth of green and infrastructure bonds. The budget has earmarked nearly $1.1 billion to promote tourism and hold more mega events. They include monthly fireworks displays and drone shows, city and nature exploration activities, and even reality shows to promote Hong Kong. The pyrotechnic and drone shows will be staged at Victoria Harbour every month. The Development Bureau will help introduce more food and beverage, retail and entertainment facilities along the harbour front. The Tourism Board will promote in-depth tourism and other young adult-focused activities, including hiking and stargazing. $100 million will be dedicated to promoting mega events, but there will be a comeback of the hotel accommodation tax at a rate of 3% starting next year. For the creative sector, $1.4 and $2.9 billion will be put into the Film Development Fund and the Create Smart initiative, respectively. And a Fashion Design Week will be held annually. Still ahead, airdrops of aid to Gaza residents as Israel and Hamas remain cautious over truce talks. Many European countries say they won't be sending troops to Ukraine after the French president did not rule out the possibility. And India unveils its astronauts for the country's first crewed mission to space. Welcome back. Israel and Hamas say obstacles still stand in the way of a ceasefire and hostage exchange deal. This after U.S. President Joe Biden said an agreement could be reached by Monday. Meanwhile, United Nations officials say Gaza is on the verge of a famine because of the lack of aid reaching critical areas of the Strip. Israel blames the UN for failing to send the trucks in. Nasvi Karim has more.
A new Jordanian airdrop of aid to Gaza, in which the country's monarch, King Abdullah, took part. 3 Jordanian C-130 military transport aircraft were joined by planes from Egypt, Qatar, United Arab Emirates and France in the biggest airdrop to date. United Nations officials say a quarter of Palestinians in Gaza are one step away from famine, with those in the north particularly vulnerable, given the lack of humanitarian aid reaching those areas. The deputy head of UN aid coordination said those in the most desperate situations represent the highest levels of food insecurity ever recorded worldwide.
Unfortunately, as grim as the picture we see today, there is every possibility for further deterioration. Military operations, insecurity, and extensive restrictions on the entry and delivery of essential goods have decimated food production and agriculture.
Israel's deputy ambassador to the UN, Brett Miller, fought back, saying there was no restrictions of aid going into Gaza. More than 500 aid trucks are reportedly waiting to enter the Strip.
How can it be that Israel is libelously held responsible for a situation that is clearly the UN's fault? The conduct of the UN in the field must be streamlined and humanitarian aid must be distributed more effectively. This is the solution. Israel is committed to improving the humanitarian situation in the northern part of Gaza as well.
The UN and other agencies say the security situation inside Gaza is preventing trucks from delivering aid and wants Israel to ensure the safety of vehicles from gangs. Meanwhile, both Israel and Hamas have played down comments by US President Joe Biden that a ceasefire and hostage deal could be sealed by Monday. Talks are continuing between the US, Egypt and Qatar on a 40-day ceasefire deal that would see the release of 40 hostages held by Hamas and Israel freeing 400 Palestinian detainees. One obstacle is Hamas's demand that Israel end the war and withdraw from Gaza.
And we continue to push to try to get this deal over the finish line. We think it's possible. We think we can reach a deal. But ultimately, we will need Hamas to say yes.
Nazri Karim, TVB News.
Many European countries, including military heavyweights Germany and Poland, affirmed they would not be sending troops to Ukraine. This after reports that some Western countries may be considering doing so, as Ukraine's fight against Russian invasion enters its third year. Daniel Rao reports.
European leaders ruled out the possibility of sending ground troops to Ukraine after a meeting at the Élysée presidential palace in Paris. This with French President Emmanuel Macron suggesting European nations might do so. At V4, countries also confirmed on Tuesday that they are not planning to send troops to Ukraine after a meeting in Bratislava. Czech leader Petr Fiala, Poland's Donald Tusk, Slovakia's Robert Fico and Hungary's Viktor Orban made the statement after a V4 leaders meeting in Bratislava. Still, Fiala said despite their agreement on Ukraine's need for help, they are willing to offer assistance in different forms. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius told a press conference after meeting with his Austrian counterpart Claudia Tanner in Vienna that boots on the ground is not an option for Germany. Britain, Spain and Italy also rejected the idea of sending troops on the ground in Ukraine. The Kremlin, meanwhile, warned a direct conflict between NATO and Russia would be inevitable if the alliance sends combat troops. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters, in this case, we need to talk not about probability, but about the inevitability of conflict. Dan Oral, TV News.
India announced on Tuesday its 4-member crew for the maiden space voyage of Gaganyaan or Skycraft in Hindi. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was on hand awarding the crew members astronaut wings at a space center in Kerala state. India aims to become the world's 4th country to send a crewed mission into space, just months after landing a spacecraft on the south pole of the moon. Tracy Furness has more.
In its first mission of its kind, India's venture into space involves the launch of a habitable space capsule over the next year to an orbit 400 kilometres above the Earth. The 4 crew members were introduced Tuesday with Prime Minister Narendra Modi awarding the 4 Air Force officers astronaut wings at a space centre in Kerala state. The astronauts made their first public appearance after months of rigorous training. Modi said on X that Gaganyaan is a historic achievement for India. This after 4 decades since Air Force officer Rakesh Sharma became the first Indian to travel to space on a Soviet mission. If it succeeds, India will become only the 4th country to send a crewed mission into space after the Soviet Union, the United States and China. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Financial Secretary Paul Chan announced an increase on tobacco duty on his budget speech today. The cost of a packet of cigarette has immediately gone up by about $16. Woo Sang-ai reports.
During his budget address, Financial Secretary Paul Chan said the government decided to increase tobacco tax. Under the tax, each packet of cigarettes is $16 more expensive than before. While the government said the tax can encourage more smokers to quit the habit, this smoker found the policy unacceptable.
Don't support this policy, it's too expensive. And this is a way to force the citizen by the black market.
This man, who has been smoking for 14 years, said the policy may be effective.
It's not a good thing to smoke. It's unhealthy. It costs a lot on a medical aspect, on the insurance. So yeah, I believe it's a good thing that they increase. Even though I am a smoker, I should calm down a little bit.
It might not stop everyone, but it could probably at least stop some people, especially the younger generation. Maybe they don't have so much money to buy expensive cigarettes.
To prevent illegal cigarette trading, the government will beef up enforcement. Meanwhile, education programs to help smokers quit the habit will also be enhanced.
Eric Lam, chairman of the city's newspaper vendor association, said the policy has created anger among the sector. He said the government should think about the livelihood of vendors and to take action against illegal cigarettes. News 9, TVB News.
The director of the central government's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office has concluded his week-long fact-finding trip to the city. On his last day in the city, Xia Baolong visited Beijing's liaison office in Hong Kong in the morning. In the afternoon, he toured the Hong Kong port at Shenzhen Bay. Chief Executive John Lee introduced to Xia the 24-hour border clearance service during the Lunar New Year. Lee said Xia relayed Beijing's acknowledgement of the Hong Kong government's efforts, adding that the central government will roll out more measures that will benefit the SAR. 2 robberies took place in the city today. 3 robbers armed with knives and hammers held up a watch store on Fu Ming Street in Causeway Bay at around 2 p.m. Footage provided by a viewer showed a woman entering the watch store. A black-clad man armed with a knife followed her before pushing her away and charged into the store with 2 other robbers. The trio smashed several glass displays to grab 30 watches before fleeing in a car. The watches have an estimated value of $6 to $8 million. Investigators said they are trying to track down 3 men of non-Chinese descent. Meanwhile, a 61-year-old male mainland traveler was attacked by 2 men at around noon in a pedestrian subway in Shengshui Wai. The attackers stole his backpack, which contained $3.6 million. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.